What if I told you that your discomfort with small talk isn't a social flaw, but a symptom of spiritual awakening? You see, the spiritually conscious individual finds themselves in a peculiar predicament. While others discuss the weather, sports scores, and office politics, something within you craves deeper connection. Think about it. When you've glimpsed the vast interconnectedness of all things, how can you possibly be satisfied with conversations that barely scratch the surface of existence? It's not that you're antisocial, quite the opposite. You're yearning for authentic communion beyond the masks we wear. But here's the thing. This tension isn't something to overcome. It's a compass pointing toward what truly matters. Our world has developed a curious contradiction. We celebrate the socially adept, those who glide effortlessly through cocktail parties and networking events with pleasant banter and easy smiles. We admire their ability to connect with anyone, anywhere. Yet in our admiration, we have confused the vessel for the water it carries. You see, the purpose of conversation isn't merely to fill silence or exchange pleasantries. It exists as the bridge between separate consciousnesses, a sacred technology for souls to touch across the void of individual experience. But how often do we use this remarkable tool merely to avoid discomfort rather than to create genuine connection? There are conversations that exchange information. There are conversations that build social bonds. There are conversations that explore ideas. And there are conversations that touch souls. Most of what we call small talk belongs firmly in the first two categories. It confirms shared reality. It establishes safe territory. It signals mutual recognition. These functions matter in human society, yes, but they represent only the shallowest waters of what communication can be. The thin surface layer of an ocean whose depths remain unexplored when we refuse to dive beneath convention. The spiritually awakened person senses these depths constantly, feels them pulling like a current beneath everyday exchanges, beckoning towards something truer. I knew a man once. At gatherings, he rarely spoke unless directly addressed. He seemed uncomfortable with the usual topics, struggling to maintain interest in discussions about property values or television shows. People found him odd, perhaps even rude. They labeled him socially awkward, assuming he lacked the skills for proper interaction. What they never understood was that his apparent awkwardness stemmed not from inability, but from awareness. When he did speak, his words carried weight and presence that changed the atmosphere in the room. He asked questions that gently guided conversations toward meaning. He listened with his entire being, not merely waiting for his turn to talk. His silences weren't empty, but contemplative. By conventional standards, he failed socially. By spiritual measures, he was masterful at connection, simply operating at a frequency most couldn't yet access. Small talk moves across the surface of our lives like wind creating ripples on a lake. These ripples have their own beauty, their own purpose in the ecosystem of human connection. But the spiritually awake person is simultaneously aware of what lies beneath, the deeper waters where truth dwells. They perceive both levels at once and feel the tension between them. When you have sensed the depths, the surface can feel insubstantial by comparison. Not unreal, but incomplete. The awakened mind doesn't necessarily reject the surface, but it cannot pretend the depths don't exist. It cannot help but hunger for more. This hunger manifests as discomfort in spaces where conversation is deliberately kept shallow. It emerges as a feeling of isolation, even in crowded rooms. It expresses as a longing for something more authentic than the scripts we recite to one another. The tragedy isn't that the spiritually conscious person feels this discomfort. The tragedy is that we interpret this sensitivity as a problem to solve, rather than wisdom to heed. I wonder if our collective dedication to comfortable conversation actually prevents the connections we truly seek. What if our aversion to awkwardness has become a barrier to authenticity? What if the social smoothness we prize so highly has become a sophisticated way to avoid truly being seen? And if that's true, what deeper forms of human connection might be waiting for us beyond the safety of small talk? Now let me tell you something about why the spiritually awake person finds small talk so challenging. It isn't merely preference or personality. It runs deeper, touching the very nature of consciousness itself. There are distinct reasons this discomfort arises, each revealing something profound about the journey of awakening. The spiritually awake person perceives the energy beneath words. They hear not just what is said, but what vibrates behind the saying. Words become transparent, revealing the emotions, intentions, and unconscious patterns that generate them. When someone says they are fine while radiating anxiety, the awakened person cannot help but sense the discord. They feel the gap between presentation and truth. This creates an immediate dilemma. Do they respond to the words offered or to the truth sensed? Do they maintain the comfortable illusion or acknowledge what actually is? Small talk requires accepting surface appearances, pretending we don't notice the currents moving beneath. But once you've developed this sensitivity, you cannot simply switch it off. What if you sat at dinner with friends discussing trivial matters, while physically seeing the profound loneliness or unspoken joy emanating from each person? Could you ignore such perception? Would you not feel a natural impulse to address what's actually present rather than what's merely discussed? The awareness of limited time and mortality makes trivial conversation feel wasteful. When you truly understand that each interaction might be your last with someone, small talk begins to feel like an indulgence we cannot afford. Each conversation becomes precious, an opportunity that will never exactly repeat. The spiritually conscious person feels this acutely. They recognize that beneath our social routines lies our shared mortality, our brief time together in this form. I once knew a woman who, after a profound awakening experience, found herself unable to engage in her previously enjoyed gossip sessions with colleagues. When asked why, she simply said, "We might have 20 more conversations before one of us dies. Perhaps 300. A finite number, whatever it is. Do I want to use them discussing people who aren't here?" Her colleagues found this morbid. She found it clarifying. Rather than dismissing small talk entirely, she began asking questions that mattered to her. What brings you joy lately? What are you learning about yourself? What feels most alive in you right now? These weren't grand philosophical inquiries, just authentic curiosities that honored the limited time we have. The craving for authentic connection transcends social performance. We are trained since childhood to perform socially, to present appropriate faces for appropriate settings. We learn the scripts so thoroughly we forget we are reciting them. The spiritually awake person has glimpsed what lies beyond these performances. They have tasted authentic presence, either in themselves or in others, and that taste changes everything. Small talk feels like agreeing to wear an unnecessary mask when they know the freedom of showing their true face. Think about it. We gather in rooms, carefully presenting curated versions of ourselves while internally longing to be truly seen. We follow elaborate social choreographies while yearning to simply dance freely together. We talk about the weather while carrying universes of experience within us. the cosmic joke of human interaction. And the spiritually awakened person struggles not because they can't perform, but because they see too clearly the absurdity of the performance. The expanded consciousness recognizes unity where others perceive separation. Small talk often functions from a foundation of separateness. It reinforces boundaries between self and other through comparisons, judgments, and tribal signaling. It says, I am here and you are there, and we are exchanging information across this gap. But spiritual awakening reveals these boundaries as convenient fictions. The awakened person experiences, to varying degrees, the reality of interconnection. They sense the shared consciousness beneath individual expressions. They feel we rather than me and you. From this perspective, conversations that emphasize difference and separation feel increasingly artificial. They feel misaligned with deeper truth. They feel like agreements to pretend we are not what we are. When you know yourself as the ocean, it feels strange to pretend you are just a wave talking to another wave about wave things, carefully avoiding any acknowledgement of your shared waterness. What if our conversations honored both our individuality and our unity? What if we could speak from wholeness rather than from separation? But here's the thing about this tension between spiritual awareness and everyday talk. It points towards something far more significant than social discomfort. It reveals a profound truth about consciousness itself and how we bridge the apparent gaps between us. What we're really exploring is not just conversation, but communion. Not just words, but presence. Not just information exchange, but the dance of separate selves seeking recognition in each other. The spiritually awakened person stands at a fascinating threshold. Having glimpsed the possibility of genuine connection, they find themselves increasingly unable to settle for less. This creates the central paradox. Those most capable of profound connection often struggle most with superficial interaction. They will seek, they will search, they will yearn for the real. This yearning isn't a flaw in their character, but the natural expression of consciousness recognizing its own potential. Like water flowing downhill, awareness naturally moves toward greater authenticity once it has sensed the possibility. What are we really doing when we talk to one another? On the surface, we exchange information, coordinate actions, establish social bonds. But beneath these practical functions lies something far more mysterious and essential. We are attempting to share consciousness itself. We are trying to make our inner reality known and to know the inner reality of another. Language is our primary technology for this impossible yet necessary task. I say impossible because words can never fully capture experience. I say necessary because without this attempt, we remain islands, separate and alone. The Zen tradition speaks of the finger pointing at the moon. The finger is not the moon. Yet without the finger, how would we know where to look? Our words are not our consciousness, yet they direct attention, creating the possibility of shared experience. The awakened person feels this distinction acutely. They sense both the power and the limitation of language. They recognize how words can either bridge or reinforce the illusion of separation. This recognition creates a profound responsibility. If our words can either wake each other up or lull each other deeper into sleep, which will we choose? If our conversations can either reveal or conceal truth, which path will we take? These are not abstract philosophical questions, but practical choices we make in each interaction. The discomfort with small talk is really discomfort with missed opportunity, with the gap between what is possible and what is actual in our human connections. In the Advaita Vedanta tradition, there is the concept of non-duality, the recognition that separation is ultimately an illusion, that beneath apparent diversity lies unity of being. From this perspective, authentic communication happens not between separate selves, but within the one self recognizing itself through different centers of consciousness. Small talk operates from the premise of separation. Deep communication emerges from the recognition of underlying unity. Consider the quality of conversation that becomes possible when two people meet in this recognition. Not speaking to create or maintain an image, not hiding behind social masks, not performing expected roles. Instead, two expressions of the same life encountering each other in wonder. Two waves of the same ocean recognizing their shared nature. This is not abstract spiritual theory, but a lived possibility available in any human encounter. I have witnessed conversations transform when even one person speaks from this place of authentic presence. The atmosphere in the room shifts, something opens. There is a palpable sense of relief, as if everyone has been holding their breath without realizing it. Permission to be real. Permission to matter. Permission to speak from the center rather than the periphery of experience. One authentic voice creates space for others to join. The awakened person struggles with small talk because they have experienced these deeper currents of communication. Having tasted water, they find it difficult to pretend that sand quenches thirst. Having experienced genuine presence, the absence of it becomes conspicuous. This isn't spiritual superiority. It is simply the natural consequence of expanded awareness. Once seen, certain things cannot be unseen. Once known, certain experiences cannot be unfelt. Yet this creates the very situation that generates growth. The tension between what is and what could be. The contrast between conditioned patterns and authentic possibility. The gap between sleeping conversation and waking dialogue. Without this tension, what would compel us to evolve? Without this discomfort, what would invite us to go deeper? The spiritually awake person stands as a walking invitation to greater authenticity, not through preaching or demanding deeper conversation, simply through being what they are, through the quality of their listening, through the precision of their speech, through their willingness to remain present even when social convention would pull them into unconscious patterns. Fragment of truth, glimpse of possibility, moment of genuine connection. What if the discomfort you feel with small talk is not a problem to solve, but wisdom trying to emerge? What if your longing for deeper connection is consciousness itself evolving through you? What if the very tension between social expectation and spiritual intuition is exactly what is needed for collective awakening? Think about it. This aversion to small talk that you experience isn't something to overcome or fix. It isn't a social deficiency requiring correction. It is a sensitivity born of awakening, a natural outcome of expanded awareness. And yet, like all aspects of spiritual growth, it invites us toward integration rather than rejection, toward transformation rather than withdrawal. Small talk serves functions in our human community. It creates safe entry points for connection. It establishes common ground before deeper exploration. It allows us to test the waters of relationship, to sense whether further depths can be navigated together. Like the shallow waters at the edge of the ocean, it provides a transition zone between separate spaces. The spiritually awakened person need not reject these shallows entirely. They need only recognize them for what they are, entranceways rather than destinations. The challenge isn't to become comfortable with empty conversation. The invitation is to transform the nature of everyday interaction by bringing your awakened presence fully into it. You need not announce your spiritual insights or redirect every conversation toward the profound. Simple presence itself carries transformative power. Conscious listening changes the speaker. Authentic attention creates space for authenticity to emerge in others. Your internal clarity affects the field of relationship even without words. This doesn't mean forcing depth where it isn't welcome or imposing spiritual perspectives on those not asking for them. Respect for where others are in their journey remains essential. The awakened person learns to meet others where they are while remaining grounded in their own truth. They develop the capacity to translate between worlds, to speak the language of everyday concerns while infusing it with the quality of presence that comes from deeper awareness. I knew a woman who, after profound awakening experiences, initially withdrew from many social situations. She found conventional conversation unbearable in its superficiality. She judged it, rejected it, and consequently found herself increasingly isolated. Over time, she recognized that this approach neither served her growth nor offered anything helpful to others. She began to experiment with bringing her full presence into even the most mundane exchanges. She practiced seeing the divine consciousness in the grocery clerk discussing the weather. She discovered ways to ask slightly deeper questions that honored the level of intimacy available in each relationship. She learned to recognize the humanity beneath social masks without demanding those masks be removed before people were ready. What she discovered surprised her. Many people were hungry for greater authenticity, waiting for permission to be more real. A simple, genuine question often opened doors to unexpected depth. Not always, of course. Some remained committed to social performance, and she learned to accept this too without judgment. But more often than she expected, people responded to the quality of her attention with greater authenticity of their own. She hadn't compromised her awakening. She had embodied it more fully by recognizing that true spiritual awareness doesn't separate itself from everyday human experience, but permeates and transforms it. The discomfort she initially felt with small talk had guided her toward this integration, serving as a compass pointing toward greater wholeness. Your own sensitivity to the limitations of conventional conversation is similarly a gift, not just to yourself but potentially to our collective evolution. It is a signpost pointing toward more authentic ways of being together, more meaningful forms of human connection. The discomfort you feel in shallow interaction isn't just a symptom of your personal awakening, but a necessary tension in our shared development of consciousness. What began as an individual spiritual growing pain becomes, when fully embraced and integrated, a medicine for our culture. Your inability to find satisfaction in empty social exchange need not isolate you. It can inspire you to pioneer more authentic ways of connecting, creating ripples that extend far beyond your personal interactions. You become a quiet invitation to greater depth, not through spiritual superiority, but through simple, genuine presence. So perhaps the challenge isn't learning to tolerate small talk, but allowing your spiritual awareness to transform what conversation can be. Perhaps your discomfort isn't a problem, but precisely the tension needed to evolve our collective communication. Perhaps in honoring both your deeper awareness and the human need for connection, you help weave a new possibility, one genuine exchange at a time. What if that discomfort you feel when conversation remains on the surface isn't a burden but a blessing? What if it exists not to separate you from others, but to guide us all toward the authentic connection our souls have always yearned for?